Welcome to Stat, I'm telling you all medical true crime stories, and it gets bizarre. Karen Wickham, yeah, she used to work in ER, and now she's sharing the knowledge, so let's get involved. Hey, funny and scary at the same time. Medical mysteries, all facts, she ain't lying. So tune in to Stat if you dare, cause crazy things can happen anytime, anywhere. Yeah.
Hello, everybody out there in podcast land. Welcome to Stat, shocking traumas and treatments, coming to you from beautiful Greater Toronto Area, Canada.
Yeah, hey guys, it's Erica.
It's Karen. Oh, did I already say that?
It doesn't matter. You can announce yourself twice.
I'm Karen.
I'm Erica.
Okay.
I'm Urka.
I like calling her Urka.
She does. She really likes calling me Erica.
Erica. Is that my voice?
Hello.
Okay,
Swango.
Swango. We're doing Michael Swango part 4, and I really thought I could do this in 4 episodes, but I can't. There's going to be one last after this one. There's just too much to talk about. I know that you could probably hear this story elsewhere where it talks about a lot of the stuff, but not the more detailed things. I find the cover-ups and all the fraudulent behavior behind the scenes, I find that fascinating, and just also getting inside his head a little bit more. So if you're still listening, you're still hanging in with it. Before I start, though, I think it's really important that I discuss something. In the prior episodes, I've talked about the Doctors Club, in which I say that there is like a doctors stick together, and they'll cover each other up, and anything from malpractice, misconduct, covering their own asses kind of thing. And I don't think I did a really good job at explaining that. I honestly don't feel all doctors are like that.
No, not all doctors are like that at all.
If I said that or did that or swayed anybody's way of seeing how doctors are, I do apologize for that, because that's not the case.
No.
I guess I was speaking out of frustration about what happened.
Right.
But you know what? I'm just going to stand and say I apologize if I really, because I think I probably did paint the doctors with the same brush, and that's not right, because I've worked with some amazing doctors and I've worked with some really bad ones. I received an email, and I'm just going to bring it up. I received an email from a doctor from London, or why did I say London? From England. And I got to say, this is the exact type of email that I really admire, I really appreciate. Because this doctor,
she took the time.
Yeah, to write this in the most respectful and articulate way. And I really, really appreciate that, and I really respect it. So I'm just going to read just a couple parts of it. And then I think it'll help clear up some things. So it says some things, and it says, I was really upset to hear the heavy emphasis on the Doctors Club in the Dr. Swango episodes. That's not to say there wasn't a huge cover-up in this case, but the idea that every doctor is somewhat in agreement to cover up mispractice, and this is taught early in medical school, is really hurtful, untrue, and quite damaging. In my medical school, we constantly have 360 assessments, which are significantly proportion of the assessors. Where a significant number of the proportion of the assessors cannot be doctors or other students. And in this case, on for the rest of their careers. Yeah, even in this case, there was multiple cases of doctors trying to stop this monster. I know this probably sounds like a not all doctors whinge, and I don't. Just so, as an aside, I don't believe that is the case. And to an extent, this is. But it's hard enough to convince people that I'm not getting paid per tablet or poisoning or poisoning their children with vaccines as it is. It doesn't mean that if someone has a bad experience with one doctor, that the thoughts of Doctors Club will significantly limit their access to care, as they may not trust any doctor. And, I thank you. You're absolutely right. And I stand corrected. I think that what took place in this Swango case is abhorrent. It's disgusting. And I believe they are part of the reason why, I think they should be culpable for his murders or, attempted murders, because it carried on. The other thing I want to say is I have had some bad experiences where I have witnessed misconduct that was covered up. I've saw fraudulent behavior, and it was covered up, and even tried to work with a couple people to try to stop this, and it didn't. But my experience is not everybody's experience. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And I want to thank you so much. And anybody, honestly,
feel free to reach out and talk to us about things. If you don't agree, it's not everybody's going to agree with things that we say, and we don't agree with things that other people say. It's the way of life. We just got to be adults about it and not get into arguments, have an adult conversation about it. We're all entitled to our own opinions. And I think that people need to realize that and not think that the way they think is, law.
No, and I was called out in a really gentle
it was great.
Way, and thank you. So I'm cool with being called out. Just, if you can do it privately and like this, that's great. Amazing. Yeah. And I think like any of us, we respond better to this type of approach as opposed to your podcast sucks. I'm going to give you a 1-star rating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're a scumbag. So,
so that's fair. That's totally fair.
Okay, so that being said, we're going to move into Dr. Swango.
Don't call him doctor.
Nah, his name is Michael Swango, and I might just call him Mike.
Yeah.
Or Swango. I stick to Swango. Okay, so where we last left off, I talked a bit about he had served the five sentences that he served for the poisoning were served concurrently, and the maximum stay of the law would allow was 5 years, and he only served 2.5 of those years. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happened kind of a little bit during this process and what happened as a further investigation. So I'm going to get to that in a sec. And he also got back together with his longtime girlfriend and nurse, Rita Dumas.
What was Rita thinking?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you just tried to kill some people.
Now, I do talk about some of his relationships because I think it's important. It gives an insight into this guy.
Yeah.
So one of the prosecutors in Swango's trial was a man by the name of Ed Morgan. And I'm going to read something he told the Plains Dealer paper about just how he felt about this case. So, quote, "The verdicts indicated to me that we are now investigating a man who is obviously a very sick individual and has to be considered a very dangerous individual. It indicates to me in my office that we are on the right track into pressing the investigation on, and we will continue the investigation." So what he's saying is that, okay, so we got him for the poisonings, but what about what happened at Ohio State?
Well, yeah, was it even...
Well, no, because it was like covered up. The doctors did the investigation of these murders and then say, oh, well, really, there's nothing proven that he did anything wrong. Let's take all the documents. Let's lock him in the president's office. And you know what? There you go. And they really thought they had, wiped their hands and the case closed. But not this Ed Morgan guy's like, no, we can't just let this go.
No, which is awesome.
So what he observed and heard of Swango's behavior in the trial and observed his personality, he felt that he was a psychopath, and he was convinced that he had committed other murders and injuries at Ohio State. He wanted to investigate Swango and bring justice to his victims. So in June, Morgan hired an experienced homicide detective by the name of Patrick Sweeney to investigate Swango full-time on behalf of the prosecuting attorney's office. Morgan and McSweeney then set up office at Ohio State Police Headquarters. The medical board investigator, this guy was cool,
right.
Dr. Ellie, and the chief, remember, Hurt,
he
was trying so hard.
So, yeah.
I remember we talked about it. You're saying, like, please tell me he took it further. Well, he took it as far as he could. Remember, the papers got a hold of it, and they went into shutdown mode. So that was his investigation team, was Hurt, Dr. Ellie, and McSweeney, and Morgan. But they also frequently consulted the Franklin County coroner, William Adrian, and the Ohio State toxicologist, Daniel Curry, who were both involved in getting Swango busted. So they had a
thank God.
They had a pretty good team there. So they began to interview the eyewitnesses at the hospital, doctors, nurses, and other hospital personnel. Now, Sigurnus, remember this?
Yeah.
This loser immediately started to interfere with the investigation. Surprise, surprise. By putting up barriers wherever he could. So he was demanding subpoenas. Getting a subpoena.
It's not an easy process.
No, it's very tedious and time consuming. Family members of some of the victims were quietly paid off and were told to keep quiet. So there goes a whole load right there. But I mean, this is not me nailing the family because they didn't really know.
No, yeah.
So they said, look, we'll give you this. And, they probably didn't know what they were signing over, right?
No, absolutely.
And here's a quote again. I like giving some of these quotes here because it really explains it better than I could.
Yeah.
So here's a quote from Morgan about the games that Sigurnus was playing. Quote, everyone on the OSU, so that's Ohio State University, staff was hesitant. Appointments were broken. We made it as convenient as possible. We'd go at 2 a.m. if that's what they wanted. Not one person showed up on time. Once we waited 3 hours for a doctor to show up. They sent some doctors away, out of town, when we wanted to see them. I got the impression that they thought we were dumb cops and that they were the saviors of mankind. I've dealt with hospitals for years on homicides, and I've never seen anything to compare to the treatment we got at OSU. End of
How
quote.
is that legal?
To send doctors
you're going to go on vacation because
here's a conference that made up conference that you have to go to. Like, I can just see these smug scumbags just sitting there going, all right, they're going to do this. Well, then we're going to do that.
We're going to go to Cuba.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, they're not allowed in Cuba.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So thankfully, they were able to do videotaped interviews with the critical witnesses, and one being Rena Cooper and her roommate, Avonia Utz. This was the lady that he injected and the student nurse saw.
Oh, yeah.
And she... poor Mrs. Cooper was like shaking the bed rails and to get attention, and she basically went paralyzed. Could see she was like locked into her body.
Yeah.
So the head resident on duty that day that Rena was poisoned was Reese Freeman, and numerous other doctors and nurses were interviewed on video. They scoured the records of every patient in the hospital during Swango's rotations, and they were able to identify 5 suspicious deaths on top of it. Plus the possible poisonings of doctors at the children's hospital.
So did they, sorry, just a quick thing here. Did they have autopsies done on these? Like, were they in the files or were the autopsies done? And
so I'm going to get to that.
Okay, I just wanted to.
No,
okay.
I totally great question. I'm going to get to that in a sec. So they scoured the records. So the results were in stark contrast to the hospital and university investigation. So Dr. Cooper was one of the physicians that agreed to be interviewed, and he was eager to tell the investigation about the death of Charlotte Warner. So she was one of the people that I discussed of the 5.
Yeah.
So again, here's another quote. Again, I think it's perfect to explain it. Quote, the first problem that I had in her case that I didn't understand was the result of the autopsy. And that demonstrated what they called multicentric thrombosis. Basically what happened is she had developed clots in all of her major arteries. She had clots in the arteries in her heart, in the vessels to her intestine, in the vessels to her kidneys, her liver, and her lungs. And I could never understand why this type of thing would have happened to somebody who had undergone a straightforward surgical procedure 5 days earlier and was walking around having no problems. It always bothered me.
So there's always that risk of blood clots after a surgery,
but
not like this.
No,
this is like,
this is
bizarre
insane.
And beyond.
Yeah. In early 1985, Cooperman learned about the ricin and castor beans in Swango's apartment, and he put 2 and 2 together. So when they went to Swango's apartment, when they arrested him for the poisonings, they found ricin. Ricin is a poison that comes out of castor beans. So he was buying them and trying to, remember he had this like crazy lab set up?
Yeah, so like to extract the poisons from the castor beans.
So what do you think
toxins?
What do you think ricin poisoning causes? It causes blood clots, thrombosis, and thromboembolism throughout the vascular system. So could it be anything else?
Is it traceable in blood?
Yes, I don't know for how long, but why would they have been looking for ricin?
Yeah, exactly. You don't. That's the thing. It's so hard to. to know what to look for and why would you think it was because honestly, was she older?
She was a bit older, but not like certainly not old.
Yeah. So it's,
and why, why they would think, oh God, maybe she developed some kind of immune reaction or something bizarre and it stuck in his head. But it was later that they went, like, because you wouldn't automatically go, oh, I'm going to look for ricin poisoning when it happened in a hospital.
Right.
So what exactly was it that happened to Charlotte Warner? Well, it seems that the suspicious deaths were consistent with the poisonings. Ed Morgan discovered how Tzurnis and his cronies manipulated Cooper and Utz's words to make it seem like they were a confused and paranoid elderly woman. So they were like, oh no, they said it was a lady with long blonde hair and a yellow coat. And these ladies didn't say anything like that. And they were not confused. They were perfectly fine.
Scary.
Yeah. To the point that, Mrs. Utz could describe exactly what happened. And so could Mrs. Cooper. So, let's just degrade and humiliate this woman who's gone through it to say that like she's been battered and assaulted. Yeah, she was crazy.
She was crazy. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, she's demented. So, which was absolutely not the case. Morgan and his team were finding inconsistencies, falsehoods, and cover-ups throughout all the investigations. The doctors and the administrators and executives had done. Morgan had many witness accounts, and he was coming up terribly short on physical evidence. First of all, the syringe that was found in the bathroom that was discovered by the PSW had been thrown away. So remember the guy he found?
Yeah. Yep.
And then he gave it to the nurse. The nurse locked it up, and then she passed it on to the head of all the nurses. And when it came down to the investigations, the doctors got a hold of it, and then it disappeared. 3 out of 5 of the dead were not autopsied. They were exhumed, but it was too late to test for those substances. So they only autopsied 2 of these people.
Why?
Well, these are all suspicious deaths. Remember, one was like in his 20s, one was in her teens. They were all perfectly healthy. Like there was.
So if it's a suspicious death, shouldn't it be an automatic autopsy?
Well, yes, exactly.
So that's the coroner's fault.
Well, no, it's not the coroner's fault. The doctors have to sign off for an autopsy. The coroner doesn't know about it unless the body is sent there.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so the doctor has to write on the form autopsy or not. So it's the doctor. Wow. So Swango was manipulating the paperwork to try to not get them
found.
Exactly.
Shit.
So as for the doctors at the children's hospital that had been poisoned, blood work and tissue and hair samples were never tested for poisonous substances because why would they?
Yeah,
they're not just
you're in a
think,
hospital.
Yeah, exactly. So it seemed like everything he tried to do was being shut down and deflected by Ohio State. Morgan put together a 65-page report and personally delivered it to the Ohio State University president, Jennings. Jennings gave it to the school's lawyer to review. The doctors' names were removed and replaced by numbers.
Of course.
Yeah. The report was released on April 1st, 1986. No action was taken against anybody at Ohio State or Ohio State itself. Michael Swango's licenses to practice medicine were suspended in Ohio on February 12, 1986, and by Illinois on March 19, 1986. Swango was released by the Illinois Department of Corrections on August 21st, like I said, 1987, after serving just 2 years of a 5-year sentence, and he was only on parole for a year.
So he was in prison when his licenses got suspended, is basically his...
Yeah.
What takes so long, I wonder? Like, why wouldn't they just be like suspended? You've been accused...
I know it's a whole process that takes quite a long time. It's actually hard for a doctor or a nurse to lose their licenses. It's quite the
lengthy process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the nurse that he was dating, as I spoke of in the beginning, before his imprisonment, Rita Dumas, stood by his side, stating that he had been framed. You have to understand, though,
brainwashed.
She was a single mother, a nurse, and he's this like charming. Everybody says good looking. I don't think he's good looking.
He is not good looking.
But this charming, good looking doctor, and he was, let's just say, he's a psychopath, so he's really good at charming and convincing people. He's a great liar.
Yeah.
So she was kind of vulnerable. So as much as I want to say, what's wrong with you, Rita?
Fucking Rita. God damn it, Rita.
Yeah.
Pull your shit together.
Exactly. I can understand how
I get it, but
he's so good, right?
Yeah.
So Swango and Dumas decided to start over again in Hampton, Virginia. He applied for a medical license from the state of Virginia, and it was rejected. Somehow he got a job as a counselor for a career development center. He was helping students get into medical school. Swango did not change his ways, though. His colleagues thought he was a creep, as he was talking about his obsession with violent death and accidents. He worked on his macabre scrapbooks at work. He had converted, this is my favorite, he had converted a basement room at the center into a living quarters. So he's with Rita, they get a place in Virginia, and then he turns a room downstairs where he worked into like a living quarters. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, he's...
And a woman, and it was the second woman that had happened the last little while, accused him of stalking her after she had rejected his sexual advances. Because he wants what he wants, you know.
And he thinks he deserves it and he gets it.
Exactly. Also, 3 colleagues came down with the symptoms the same as the paramedics did in Quincy. Nausea, vomiting, and severe headaches. And one of them was hospitalized. So he didn't change any of his ways.
No.
He left in May 1989. But one of the employees made a complaint about the illness and her suspicions about Swango's possible involvement. The Newport Virginia police, looked into it.
I'm good.
Okay. They followed Swango's trial back to Columbus, Ohio, and then they spoke to the prosecutor, Ed Morgan. So they did full circle and ended up
good old Ed.
So they actually, they listened to what this woman had to say.
Yeah.
And then they did a full circle. So Morgan then sent him a copy of his 65-page report that was dismissed at Ohio State.
Yeah.
And this led them to the articles in the Columbus Dispatcher about Swango,
what had happened,
and going to prison,
and
the poisonings and everything. Also, the suspicious deaths. So Swango caught wind of this from a friend that an article had been written about him and his current accusations, so with the poisonings, and his prison time. So he went to the Newport police to clear his name. So he's all about, I want to get to them before they get to me or anybody else.
Yeah, so it makes him look innocent.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I heard this about me. I want to because he wants to spin his web of lies to get them to, but he can't. I don't know what he thinks that he is going to do convincing cops. It just doesn't work.
No. Makes you look more guilty.
The cops are supposed to be the dumbasses and the doctors are supposed to be the smart ones, right?
Yeah.
Well, no one's dumb here. It's just a matter, in this case, it's willful ignorance and it's cover-ups, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just doctors, it's people in administration, right? So anyway, he went to the Newport police to clear his name. And as far as his name goes, he began the process of legally changing it to David Jackson Adams. So he changed his name.
David Jackson Adams.
I want to know how he came up with that.
God,
one point
probably
in the future,
scrapbooking.
In the future, he changes his name again, and his last name's Kirk because it was after Captain Kirk. But we'll get to that eventually.
God.
For some reason, he used his real name on at his next job, though, so he didn't use his new name.
He used Michael Swango.
Yeah. Who knows? So he got a job at Coal Services, and this is a company that tested coal samples to be exported to France. So pretty much like science-y kind of stuff, but not medicine. But he got another job as a paramedic at a nearby hospital.
Oh, good.
So
it's a good thing for background checks.
Exactly. And I'm thinking eventually this guy, if he just didn't work as a doctor, he could probably bounce around and get jobs as paramedics all over the place.
Yeah.
But anyway, so no one questioned his references, and they didn't call any of his former jobs, like Quincy, where they would have told him, oh yeah, he was in prison for 2 years for poisoning the paramedics, his coworkers. So they didn't call Quincy. They didn't call anybody. They're just like, all right, you're hired. On July 8th, on July 8th, 1989, he married Rita Dumas. On the outside, and to everyone who had any acquaintance of him, it looked like he lived a normal, solid life, that he had a good job and a decent salary and a wife. And, a lot of these sociopaths, psychopaths, serial killers want to present themselves as looking as normal as possible.
Yeah.
So as much as they are, so they're playing a role. So there's nothing genuine about it, but it looks good on a very superficial level to
Absolutely,
other people, right?
Yeah.
So this was far from the truth. Almost immediately after the wedding, Swango's true colors began to surface, and his relationship was going downhill fast. Rita shared with a friend that he didn't want to have any intimate relations with her, and no intimacy. Like, he wasn't kind or gentle or romantic or considerate, and then all the way to, like, you know, having sex. It just it just stopped. They slept in a separate bedroom, and he took another room and he turned it into a den, had a computer, and was on it constantly. So basically, he moved out of their bedroom, made an office, and
stayed in it.
And lived in there. He stole money from her bank account and refused to pay her for any of the household expenses. So she carried the whole of their expenses, including rent and everything. And he was making a decent income and keeping it all for himself.
Oh my God. What? I don't understand the frame of thinking that what made her stay.
Well, she doesn't stay.
Okay, good.
So he was also cheating on her, and it looks like he might have gotten another woman pregnant that he was cheating with. So on January 1991, they legally separated.
Good.
Meanwhile, Swango started to poison his coworkers, and they became violently ill. Vomiting, nausea, dizziness, weakness,
all
severe
the same
headaches,
symptoms.
Yeah, and sweating. And one of the executives at the company became so sick that they fell into a coma. They came out of the coma, but they were in a temporary coma.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he continued to look for work as a doctor. So let's sum this up. He gets kicked out of school. He's served time for poisoning. He gets 2 separate jobs.
Gets married.
Gets married.
Gets separated.
There's a complete monster throughout it. And now, in the meantime, this whole time, he's still looking for work as a doctor.
And nobody's the wiser.
Specifically, what he's looking for is to finish his residency so that he can specialize, right?
Right.
All right. So, deep breath. He applied for a position in Wheeling, Virginia, at a hospital under the new name David Jackson Adams. I don't know how he came up with that name.
Dr. Jackson Adams. Dr. Jackson Adams, paging.
You can do a poisoning in room 3 right now.
Nobody will be the wiser,
Yeah.
and you can sign off on that.
As no autopsy.
Perfect.
Actually, some nurses will see it, and we won't believe them.
No.
That's how it works.
Because you know why? They're just nurses.
They're just nurses.
Yeah.
Okay, so he did have to reveal his name.
His real name.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's no David Jackson Adams that graduated, at least not how he did. So, I mean, he had to have his paperwork in order, right?
Right.
So right off the bat, he told the hospital's chief of staff, Dr. Jeffrey Schultz, about his felony conviction. Only he lied in that, okay, so he had to tell him about his felony conviction.
Right.
But what he did is that he lied about the details of it. And he, I don't know how, but he stole a letterhead from the Commonwealth of Virginia's Office of the Governor General.
How do you...
So he either downloaded it from the internet, you know, but I mean, this is 91. So, I mean, there wasn't like that.
It was dial-up.
Yeah.
Back in those days.
Exactly. Or he somehow got his hands on it. Who knows? And so what he wrote, so he forged a document stating that his charge was felony assault from a physical fight, not poisoning. So basically, he got into a punch-out.
Yeah, and then that's what makes him look so innocent. What a dick.
So now he's getting smarter, right? Like, he's starting to forge. Like, he's changing his environment as he goes along, right? He's a chameleon, right?
Yep.
So the truth was revealed to Dr. Schultz as he was not hired. So the guy figured it out. But this didn't discourage him, because soon after this rejection, he applied for another resident position. So with his marriage over, he relentlessly pursued a relationship with a 25-year-old ICU nurse by the name of Kristen Kinney.
And how old was he at this time? Not that age matters.
I think he was 37.
Okay.
Which is quite old for a resident.
Right.
I mean, most of these resident or doctors are, you know, maybe like 20 in their mid-20s, early mid-20s as well. So he was still living in Newport, Virginia at the time. He saw this nurse and he started to pursue her. So let me tell you a little bit about Kristen. And there's a reason why I'm going to go right into the details of this relationship with him. Again, because I think her story needs to be told. I think more people need to know about it. And again, it gets insight to this psycho. So she came from a close-knit family. Her mother was an ER nurse. She had a stepdad, and since she was young, and he was a really good guy. She was funny and full of life, and she loved her family and her job. And at the time that she met him, she was dating a doctor. So always looking up in the world for her until the fateful day that she met Swango. And this would lead to a slow and painful decline for her. She met Swango at the hospital where she worked in the ICU while he was taking an advanced life support course. Shortly afterwards, he asked her out, but she declined his offer because she was dating this other doctor at the time. But he wouldn't take no for an answer, and he practically stalked her. He would find a way to run into her.
That's so creepy. Gross.
You're having lunch here?
Oh, me too.
Oh, you parked over there? Yeah. And he would bring her flowers and compliment her and was soon calling her every night. So, but there's a lot of still like trusting going on. I mean, serial killers weren't like a huge.
No.
I mean, of course, we went through, there was Bundy's and.
Yeah.
Oh, Night Stalker. Well, no, Night Stalker came a bit later. But still, it was just becoming more of a phenomenon in that time, or at least being recognized. So he eventually got her to break up with her boyfriend. And Kristen and Swango began to date. She was previously married and had not had the greatest luck with men. So she was in an abusive relationship prior to this. And just the guy she's had in her life, they just took advantage of her kindness. She also came from a really abusive family. Let me back up there. Her father was very abusive.
Not her stepfather.
Or her mom.
Got it.
Okay.
Yep.
The relationship with Swango, though, would turn out to be her worst. He knew how to prey on her weaknesses, manipulate and charm her. Kristen and Swango got engaged in May 1992. And they did this before her parents even met him, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. The mother thought that he treated her as a queen, but the stepfather was not fooled in any way. He saw right through his charm. He started to ask Swango questions about his education, his employment, and his personal life. Swango became cold and evasive. So the stepfather's name's Al Cooper, so I might refer to him as
good
Mr.
old
Cooper
Al.
or Al, like Alice Cooper.
Totally good name.
Swango became cold and evasive. Al Cooper, the stepfather, so I refer to him as Al. Didn't like his new son-in-law to be. So after Kristen and Swango left, he said to his wife, and her name is Sharon, that's Kristen's mother, I hope he is what he says he is. So right off the bat, he's like, don't like this guy.
Yeah.
In September 1991, Swango applied for a residency at the University of South Dakota in Sioux Falls. Dr. Anthony Salem reviewed Swango's application. And like what Swango does, he made a preemptive strike to get to them before they started to go, what is with this guy? Well, maybe if I go in and tell him my fake story first.
They won't research me.
Exactly. His application that he sent and the letter to why he, want to do work there and stuff like that or do his residency was full of falsehoods, diversions from the truth. So this guy is good at, and like I think any good liar, is a mix the truth with the lie. So if you go...
And I bet you he believed it.
That's a good question. I don't know if he did or not. So, I can say I ran into this person and they were a complete dick to me. And they did this and that, whatever.
Right.
The this and that, whatever didn't happen. But the person might have been a bit of a dick. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So then you go, oh, that probably did happen. Yeah. If this part is true, it can't really disprove the other part. So this is what this guy was really good at, mixing the truth with the lies. So instead of deterring Dr. Salem, it intrigued him. He's like, oh, what an honest chap.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he only pretend punched somebody.
Yeah.
There was no poisoning, so let's hire him.
Yeah. In spite of the felony charges, he thought that Swango's credentials looked excellent, especially from his recommendations from Ohio State. So let's just talk for a second how dangerous that was. That Ohio State covered everything up and still gave recommendations. Now they were like very vanilla recommendations. They didn't say anything bad, they didn't say anything great, but they still were recommendations.
Yeah.
Right? So that's dangerous because those led to him getting other jobs. Instead of it
As
being-
a doctor.
Yeah. So instead of it saying like, ooh, I don't know. Well, he didn't get any recommendations. Oh, how come? And that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it just makes him look.
Yeah. It encouraged him and allowed him to continue to be taken seriously. So again, the only thing that stood out was that Salem.
Right.
Was that he had a battery conviction, which Swango described as a fist fight, not poisonings.
Right.
So Dr. Salem was considered a thorough, meticulous, and detailed-oriented physician, so that made it really unusual that he was even considering, even looking at this resume, let alone, talking to this guy. Like, he considered him a potential candidate. Like, what the hell? So he called the licensing board in Illinois, and they reported that he lost his license and it was revoked for, quote, disciplinary reasons. So it didn't say why he lost it. It just said disciplinary. Again, dangerous. And so did Ohio. So both Ohio and Illinois that revoked his license just had disciplinary reasons.
Okay, but wouldn't you think, though, that if you're seeing that his license was revoked in two places, even if it's for disciplinary, wouldn't you still assume that, oh, okay, wait a minute, his license has been revoked twice.
Yes.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. That's just a, dumb nurse and paramedical staff talking.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell do we know?
We don't know anything.
So no other details were provided. Now the AMA, which is the American Medical Association, I'm just going to keep referring to them to the AMA, was even more vague. And it took them a month to get back to Dr. Salem. And their response was that he lost his license for an unspecified reason, and an action was taken by two licensing boards. So why did he lose it? Oh, it was an unspecified reason, and it's
fine.
Two of them.
Just hire him.
So yeah, it was so vague, and it took a month to get back. Like, So this was consistent with Swango's behavior.
Right.
Because in a twisted and ironic way, it worked for him.
Right.
Because he goes in and says, look, right off the top, I'm going to tell you I have a felony conviction.
And this is why.
And it was for a fist fight.
Yeah.
And I lost this and this. So because they were so vague, again,
it looks like he's
lies,
telling the truth. Yes.
Yeah, I got a felony conviction. Okay, now here comes the lie about what I did. Yeah, I lost my license. Well, here comes in the vagueness of why he lost his license.
Right.
Okay. In the meantime, he's like adding icing and sugar and sweetening up by being this Mr. Charming.
Yeah.
Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Honest, right? So it just gets all bunged up. But you still think people would still go, yeah, he might be a nice guy.
Yeah.
But not doctor material. So it looked like he was being transparent and honest, but it wasn't, it couldn't have been further from the truth. So the vagueness of the reports made it look like what he did was a simple assault.
Right.
So here we are. The cover-ups were mounting. So we've got Ohio State. We've got the vagueness of what's gone on in other places and the licensing boards and everything. So now what we've got here is murders.
Yeah.
Assaults to patients that almost died. Poisonings, forgery, and fraud. Okay?
But let's let him walk around and get his license back.
Yeah, this could have been stopped in Ohio State.
Yep.
And yet he was still being considered for a position for residency and to practice medicine.
Which is effed up.
So instead of stopping right there, Dr. Salem continued to search for more information on Swango. And Swango decided to take a different tactic. And he came out and told Salem the truth. Well, sort of. He said that he was falsely accused by paramedics that were jealous that he was a doctor. So it's like, you know what? Okay, it wasn't a fist fight. It was that I was falsely accused because of jealousy. So instead of Dr. Salem finally dismissing this application outright, so now he knows he served time for poisoning.
But it was a lie. He's saying it's a lie.
Yeah, he grew to like Swango more and more. So he called him for a final interview. Swango being his charming and persuasive self, this is all he needed was to get in the door for him now to pour it on, right?
Oh yeah, it's on now.
So this is what Salem said about him and why he took him for the final interview. because he was a remarkably candid young man and also courageous.
So courageous for poisoning all those people.
Killing people.
Good for you.
He saw Swango as a victim of a miscarriage of justice. Did he call Quincy? Did he find out? He didn't do any of his due diligence. He's a victim of a miscarriage of justice.
Why not?
Still, Salem didn't think that Swango could be a candidate because the University of South Dakota had a policy that they did not hire residents who couldn't actually practice as a doctor in the future. So there's no point in putting you through residency if you can never work as a doctor.
Right.
Because it's hard to get into a residency. There's a lot of competition. So we might as well let someone in that could be a doctor one day as opposed to, as much as I like this dude. So you know what Swango did? Give it to me.
Give it to me.
So you know what Swango did? He's like, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna research this for you. And let's find out if this is actually the case, Dr. Salem. So he seasoned.
He's so courageous.
Yeah. So he did his research, found a loophole, and then he seasoned it with like smoke and mirrors to cover up the fact that it would not change the outcome. So what he said is, no, like really, it's okay. Like I can practice here. I can do residency here. Like, I'm not sure where you got your information, but in fact, that's just not true. So he was like manipulating the doctor and saying that that he could still
practice,
do it, and that, but the fact is he was still not eligible to work in South Dakota or get a license. But he somehow convinced Dr. Salem that he would be able to.
Right.
So no one looked into this.
What the hell?
His next interview was by a panel of 5 internists. And he was told that to these 5 panelists, that there are a handful of states that have in place a policy that allows someone to have a chance to turn their life around and to be able to get a license to practice medicine. So now he gets in front of 5 internists.
Yeah.
And he says, there's a handful of states that have a get out of jail free card. Didn't you know that? And South Dakota is one of them. Why does anybody fucking believe this? These are some of the most intelligent human beings out there. And they're like, oh, that's a nice thing to know. So again, did you think it occurred to them to call the Quincy police?
No.
So now they know he had felony charges. He admitted to poisoning. He admitted to serving time. And then do you think they would go, you know what, maybe we should look into it a little further with the Quincy police? No. So what was the end result of all of this? Swango was accepted to a residency into internal medicine at the University of South Dakota.
Of course he was.
Swango and Kristen left for South Dakota at the end of May. The day that Kristen left, her mother, Sharon, had a panic attack. She felt extreme fear for her daughter's life. She didn't know why, but she just felt like something was very wrong. And unfortunately, she was right.
Yeah.
So Kristen got a job at the ICU at Royal C. Johnson's Veteran Memorial Hospital in South Dakota, Sioux Falls.
Right.
She was very popular and well-liked for her sense of humor and her caring and compassionate work ethic. The one weird thing was that she didn't tell anybody that she was engaged to Swango. It was only after a while of being there that they found out. Swango started to work on the same floor, or would rotate through different floors. So he would be on the floor and, everybody was like, who's that new charming and handsome Dr. Swango? And it was only after a little while that Kristen admitted that she, in fact, was engaged to him.
That's kind of fucked up, to be honest.
It's almost like she kind of had her reservations somehow, right? So this time, though, Swango was getting smarter and he was learning from his past mistakes. He managed to maintain a calm and reassuring and competent appearance. So remember before he was like just a dick to everybody?
Yeah, now he's trying to...
Now he's like, I got to keep up this.
Yeah.
He didn't bring his scrapbooks to work. He didn't talk about explicit sex and his obsession with violence and gruesome deaths. And while she was... So Kristen, as she got to know everybody, she became close with a lot of the nurses, but particularly close with a nurse by the name of Lisa Flynn, who also worked closely with Swango. And she didn't notice anything unusual with him either. So things seem to be going well. But Swango, in his usual cocky way, risked getting exposed for the lying felon that he was by applying for a membership at the AMA.
He is
He's like
special.
Yeah, he's just like, okay, well, I somehow got this residence and I flew through somehow. But you know what? I'm going to bring more attention to myself because I'm Dr. Swango. So he realized that they were doing more digging into his past, so he withdrew his application. But it was already too late for him to go unnoticed. And one of the doctors at the AMA found out about Swango's criminal past. This doctor knew Dr. Robert Talley, and he was the dean of USD, University of South Dakota. So here he puts his application in, they dig in, they see that he's working at USD. This one doctor says, shit, I know he's a dean of medicine. What does he know about Swango? So they told Talley everything that they knew. So on Wednesday, November 25th, 1992, Dr. Salem, remember he's the one that hired him, received a phone call from Dr. Talley inquiring about Swango. Talley told Swango about his enlightening conversation with the AMA. And Salem said, oh yeah, I know all about Swango's past. He told me up front. But Talley quickly shut that down when he told Salem about the suspicious deaths at Ohio State and the poisonings that he was convicted of. So even though Swango told him about the poisonings, they told him, wait a minute, this is way more than you realize. Salem felt sick. He was shocked and uneasy with what he had done with hiring Swango and what Swango might have been doing during his current residency at USD. So then Talley went ahead and called Zagurnis on Friday to follow up with what he found out from the AMA. Zagurnis gave a very surface explanation of Swango's time at Ohio State. So this is really, really interesting. While Talley and Salem were trying to figure out what to do with Swango, a show called The Justice Files from the Discovery Channel aired a segment on Swango that used footage from an earlier broadcast on 2020 in which Swango was when he was in prison.
Oh my God.
So as they're finding this shit out, this program aired and it showed him in his like arrogant interview with 2020 where they broke down everything. So it aired at 10 p.m. and at 10:20, Dr. Salem got a call from a shocked employee at the VA
Why'd
hospital.
you hire this motherfucker?
Yeah. And then 5 minutes after that, he heard from a doctor who recognized Swango and couldn't believe that Swango, what he was revealing. So Salem got in his car and like whipped to his office, fired off an email to Swango revoking his pharmacy privileges and suspending his residency. By Tuesday morning, this was in the Sioux Falls Argus Leader newspaper. And this is in part what it said, quote, a first-year resident practicing medicine at 3 Sioux Falls hospitals was convicted of poisoning 6 coworkers in Illinois and spent 2 years in jail. Swango was also suspected in the death of at least one patient at an Ohio State hospital. So this is in the papers. Swango's coworkers didn't want to talk, though, because they were afraid that he might poison them. So they're like being all tight-lipped about it because they're like, oh,
I don't want to die.
Yeah. Swango was asked to meet with Salem the next day. And meanwhile, all the records of the patients that he had seen were pulled to see if they could find anything suspicious. So they're like going like, oh my God, who did he see? And are they okay? Right?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
This guy is...
So, but Swango continued to act confused and surprised by the meeting. Like, what happened? What happened? So when he went to the meeting, he's like, what's this meeting for? So Salem popped in a copy of the Justice Files into his VCR. And his
VCR.
Yeah, I know. And his fiance came with Swango. So Kristen was there to see this video as well. And he said that Salem said that she looked visibly upset and pale while watching it. She clearly didn't know anything about Swango's past. Swango remained calm and poised and curious as to why he was being called to a meeting. He's still like, okay, so I saw the video. So still, I don't understand why I'm here. So Dr. Salem asked for an explanation, and Swango just repeatedly said what he had said before during the interview process. I was, a victim of jealousy and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, Swango was dismissed from his residency. But was it reported? No. He didn't report Swango's residency at USD or any of the concerns to anyone. Case closed? No. So Kristen called in sick the next day, and she was just beside herself. Her friend, Lisa, called a few days later to check on her, and she asked if she was afraid and if she wanted to come live with her to leave him. And Kristen said that she wasn't worried at all. Swango was a good person who cared about people. And she was pissed off at the media for defaming his character and destroying his career. So, Swango got in her head, right? Swango, again, did his, preemptive strike. He called Kristen's stepfather, Al Cooper, to get inside his head before he saw the news. He convinced Al that it was a media hoax. And then Al told Sharon, and Sharon was like, oh, fuck. And immediately called Kristen. Yeah, to see if she was okay.
Yeah, to be like, hey.
You want to come back home? And she told her mom not to worry and that it was all lies and she was safe with him. Swango, who was on the other end of the phone listening in, told Sharon that it was a temporary setback and it would all blow over.
Everything's fine.
Yeah. Shit hit the fan at USD and all the hospitals that he had worked at, the 3 hospitals. The governor of South Dakota found out and he was incensed. After a good show to the public and the media, the dust did settle and no one was fired. It was business as usual. So did Salem lose his job? No.
Should he have lost his job?
Yes. What about the 5 doctors on the panel who were like, yeah, it's tally-ho, chop, good chap. Have him come in.
Karen's British, can you tell?
Yeah. Bee's knees.
This is the bee's
Cat's
knees.
pajamas. So, what did Swango do? He hired a lawyer to have the decision overturned. But the review committee upheld this dismissal. So is this the end of Swango's dealings with USD?
Nope. No.
How do you know the answers to all these, Erica? You're so smart.
I think it's just from you talking about it. And you getting so angry, and then I just automatically know. I'm like, oh yeah. Is it the end?
No. Swango contacted Vern Cook, who was administrator at the VA hospital, who was also the president of the what? Hospitals Union. Swango asked Cook if he would represent him in getting his dismissal overturned. Cook had had dealings with Swango at the hospital, and he really liked him. And he also liked Kristen, Swango's fiance. He saw her as a little sister. So it was, a platonic thing. He just really thought she was cool. So Cook agreed to represent him. Cook and Swango became good friends. And here's the reason why I think. Vern Cook was a Vietnam vet. And Swango couldn't get enough of his war stories. He loved, the gruesome death, destruction, murder, the whole bit. So they shared the same fascination with the macabre. Swango began to loosen up with Cook. He started to share his scrapbooks. He sent him newspaper clippings with stories of violent deaths. He told Cook that he was an ambulance chaser and he would go to the scenes to observe. And at this point, he wasn't working as a paramedic. He would just go. He'd had a radio. He'd hear what was happening and he'd just show up at the scene. He discussed his favorite serial killers and his obsession with serial killers grew. So even though he had one before, it was getting more obsessive. Now that Swango was no longer had to put on a show for the hospital, he was letting his guard down, not only with Cook, but with Kristen. She was seeing a darker side of him more and more. So, when he had to put on a show to keep what he had, it almost kept him in check. But when he didn't have to anymore, he just didn't give a fuck. And he just was, back to himself. So Kristen kept working at the ICU and the staff there supported her, but she just remained adamant that Swango was innocent. So they just kind of, all right, just let it go because she's not going to,
Yeah, like
she's going to support him.
Uh-huh.
But Kristen's closest friends were becoming more concerned about him. Stories started to surface about his bizarre behavior. So as much as people were like, oh, he seems like a good chap, a good doctor. I really like him. There was everybody was having these like creepy feelings about him, but they didn't want to say anything. So check this out. You ready?
Yeah.
A fellow resident was a patient in the hospital. She woke up in the middle of the night and found Swango sitting in the chair beside her, watching her.
Nope. Creepy.
Can you imagine you wake up in the middle of the night, not just anybody's there, but your doctor sitting there watching you sleep?
Well, I woke up in the middle of the night and Karen was sitting in a chair watching me sleep. So,
yeah.
Okay. That's like, I thought that was
but
okay.
I'm not a serial killer.
No, exactly.
So the thing about this resident, and there is, you'll understand why. This resident was overweight, and Swango hated overweight people. Like, he would go on and on about how much he hated overweight people. So he stated that he had a fantasy. So he told people about this at work. That he had a fantasy about slicing up fat people with razor blades attached to the tips of his toes. Oh, sorry, the tips of his shoes. So he was likely sitting there fantasizing about slicing her up.
Who did he tell this to?
People, like coworkers.
And they didn't think that this dude had a problem?
Well, that's the thing. Like he was learning now to, so it appeared that he was well liked, but the fact is he was like,
people were scared of him.
He was telling people individually, not in a group.
Okay.
Right? So they were just like, oh, everybody else likes him, but fuck. Right?
But he's such a creep.
Yeah. And so it's like, you know, oh yeah, well, I'll just pretend to like him and maybe this will just stop. Or maybe it's in my head. Maybe I'm taking it too seriously, but I'm going
to doubt it.
When someone goes as far as saying, first of all, slicing people up with a razor blade. That's
attached to your shoes.
No, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of thought put into it, but then when you're attaching it to your shoes, like, I don't even.
Now you've
like, you're deep in that fantasy. At the same time,
oh God,
he was also openly dating another nurse at the hospital. All the other nurses and doctors knew that Kristen was his fiance.
Did Kristen know?
No. So it wasn't at the same hospital that he was dating, because he worked at 3, right?
Right.
So at a different hospital, but it was enough that everybody else knew about it. They saw him going about town with her, going about to meeting.
Yeah.
So, and then not only was he screwing around in her, there was another nurse that was pressing stalking charges against him. Yeah. So he was maybe a tiny bit less psycho in appearance.
In appearance.
Because he was trying to curb it, but he was still being a complete psycho and scaring people, but more individually.
Right.
And they weren't coming together and talking about it.
Right.
In early January, Kristen made a frantic phone call to her stepfather. She told him that she had found a recipe card on the back of a picture. The recipe's ingredients included poisons. So, like, here's my brownie recipe with arsenic in it.
Don't worry about that arsenic.
Yeah. And so they were like at the back of pictures. So like he was hiding them, right? Like a framed picture. I guess, I don't know how she got to it, cleaning it, something. He wanted to pick her up right away, but she's like, no, I'm fine. I'll confront him about it. They didn't hear anything from her for 2 days. And she said, oh, no, I'm fine. Michael explained everything to me, and he said it belonged to his father. Dear old dad that passed away, Vietnam vet, just would write up poison brownie
recipes on the back of pictures.
You know, let's have some arsenic stroganoff.
Delightful.
And I love ricin. Oh no, let's have ricin pudding instead of rice pudding.
Ricin pudding with cinnamon.
I need to clot up everything in my body. Yeah, with cinnamon.
Clots.
Well, I think it's a cyanide that smells like almonds, is it?
Does it?
Yeah, I think so. So, almond ricin.
Almond ricin. And no, we're not high.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you got it in there. There you go.
You're welcome.
Kristen's parents and friends noticed that Swango was isolating Kristen more and more. Whenever they called, he answered the phone. He would also listen in when she was talking. So now he's like so possessive, right? It wasn't like that before. It's like that now. Kristen started to express her concerns about Swango to her closest friends, including Vern Cook. She stated that she started to realize that she really didn't know him at all, that he was behaving stranger every day, and that she kept asking him about these poison recipes because she was finding them, and he would go like fly into a rage and say, I'm leaving you.
Bye.
Yeah. So Kristen's declining health was drawing concern by her coworkers, especially Lisa Flynn. She began having severe headaches and nausea. So on January 13, 1993, there's a reason why I'm specifying this date. Kristen became violently ill in the lobby of a local health clinic. She experienced intense nausea, headache, disorientation, and she fainted. These are classic symptoms of nicotine poisoning. Kristen never expressed concerns about being poisoned, but I'm pretty sure that it was on her mind. But, some people will go into
denial.
Some people will go into denial, right? Like she came from an abusive father, abusive relationships. Now she's with this dude. Seems that everything was going well. She's getting sick, and
she just thinks it's
she's like, oh no, he's innocent. But I'm sure in the back of her head, I mean, she's a smart woman, right?
You'd think.
Yeah. So you can be smart in one sense and dumb in relationships. I don't think anybody's really ever dumb. They just don't want it to be the way it is. Or they're so manipulated.
They don't want that to be the truth because they care for this person.
Or they're freaking gaslit. You know what I mean? It's terrible. So I'm going to read some excerpts from her journals.
Okay.
Because I think it best describes what's going on in the Swango household, Swango Cooper household. Okay. So on the January 13th is when she was really sick. Mm-hmm. So this was written on January 14th, 1993. So the next day. It starts.
Was she taken to the hospital?
No.
Okay.
So this is how it starts. It says, I don't know where to begin. I don't know how to help myself. I don't know who to talk to. Then further down in the entry, it says, I hope that writing this will help. Maybe I won't get any more migraines. I still feel numb and drugged from this one. It's been the worst ever, and I can't stand it anymore. I was in the lobby of Central Plains Clinic. I felt the color leave my face, and sweat began. I got tears in my eyes. I began wandering to find a restroom. I was dry heaving, and my vision was getting blurry. I was hanging onto the staircase railing and latched onto some woman and pleaded with her to help me. I was vomiting in the bathroom. I kept thinking, I feel like a horse who's broke their legs and in great pain and no way for it to heal, and that someone will come soon and shoot me and it will be all better. End of quote.
Wow.
Michael was angry the whole day. I think because I am weak and I can't control these headaches. He got me home and I passed out, and when I woke up, he was gone. So yeah. End of quote, sorry. So in the meantime, his anger towards Kristen often seemed to trigger memories of abuse that she had at the hands of her father.
Right.
So she's going through hell, and then she's going through even more personal hell because it's triggering,
he doesn't
right?
care, yeah.
So then there's an entry on January 28th, 1993. Quote, it's been 2 long months since all this began. I can feel Michael growing more and more anxious to move on. We haven't heard what the date of his appeal is. He continues to write organizations and send resumes and such, but hasn't heard anything yet. I admire his perseverance. I am very nervous about our future. Sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for another bomb to go off. In a way, I wish it would hurry up and happen, but I don't know how I'll deal with it. End of quote. So, it shows that, the stress in the home. So she's getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And then the stress is mounting with him because he's like,
what am I going to do?
Yeah. So Kristen's migraines and nausea continued. She began taking medications to help with her depression and anxiety. And she started talking to a marriage counselor on her own. But she was still getting sicker and sicker and found it hard to go to work. She found herself trembling with weakness and anxiety most of the time and had frequent fainting spells and would lose long periods of time. Late on a Saturday night, Kristen was found walking naked on East 5th Street. The temperature was minus 16.
Oh my God.
So they just found her wandering around naked in minus 16 weather. And this is not her. Like, this is not a woman on drugs wandering around or psychotic, she's had a psychotic break or anything like that. This is just like, what the hell happened? She was treated and admitted to the psych floor and then discharged 3 days later. So Kristen had found some very disturbing documents among Swango's files at home, but she didn't tell anyone what it was. She was too afraid. She was able to return to work shortly after the psych admission. When she did, she asked her friend Flynn if she could stay with her if she ever needed it. She said that she was experiencing strange things. Kristen was told by someone at the hospital that her past and current symptoms were like nicotine poisoning, but Kristen didn't smoke. So they're like, yeah, looks like you have nicotine poisoning, but I don't smoke.
Wow.
Nicotine in high doses is a potent poison. So the early symptoms are nausea, abdominal pain, headache, and dizziness, which lead to confusion, muscular twitching, weakness, and depression. And then the latent stage is paralysis, coma, and death. Jesus. So think about it. She had all those initial, I'm going to say mildish symptoms, which aren't mild, but no wonder she was wandering around naked, because she was obviously like confused. It causes confusion, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And nicotine was one of the poisons found in the search of Swango's apartment in Quincy. So it wasn't like he had cigarettes there.
He just took it home with him. He just said, I'm going to travel with this. Yeah. This is an easy poison too.
Yeah. He had little bottles of liquid nicotine.
Holy shit.
Okay. So when I was younger, I tried smoking and I was so sick. After like half a cigarette, I was like gaggy and headachy and dizzy. And I was like, nope, don't like this. So I'm thinking that is like nothing compared to like what this poor woman was going through.
I can't even imagine. I really can't.
So on March 21st, Al Cooper, not to be
mistaken for Alice Cooper,
had a heart attack. So Kristen was like, being the natural nurse and everything, she's like, she flew home right away to help take care of him. And she was there for a couple weeks. Her mother could not believe how bad she looked. She was like, what's happened to my daughter? She's this gray, gaunt, sickly, nothing like this vivacious.
Yeah, that she was before she met Swango. Yeah.
And so she was there for a couple weeks, and funny enough, she started to feel better, right? So she's like, that's it. I'm done. She flew back to South Dakota, gave her notice at the hospital, packed up all her stuff, and moved back to Virginia. And this was on April 9th, 1993. So she's like, I'm done with this. I'm out of here. Everybody's like, oh, thank God. She's away from him and all this shit. Her parents were ecstatic. And her aunt had an apartment building that she rented out. And she said, you know what? Move into the apartment. We'll figure everything else. Just come home. She got a job in the area at the ICU at a hospital called Riverside. And this was her new beginning. But it was short-lived. When Kristen's parents showed up at her apartment a couple weeks later for a visit, Michael Swango opened the door. And they were stunned and dismayed. They're like, what? So
what is she thinking?
Yeah. So the mother's kind of like, and then she saw that he had put on a bit of weight. And she said, oh, it looks like not even like, hey, fatty. She's like, oh, it looks like you put on a bit of weight. He went into a rage. He's like, how dare you fucking talk to me like this? How do you think? So yeah, nice seeing you again, right? Like he went mental. They're like, oh, okay. And, didn't stay too long. And they were like, oh my God.
Like, what is she thinking? You're letting him back in.
Well, you see, during this time, like she was his cash cow. He wasn't working. He was just trying to get a job again as a doctor.
Yeah.
He wasn't picking up work anywhere. I mean, sure, he could have worked anywhere, but she was paying for everything, taking care of everything. So now she leaves. Where's he going to live? Right? So, of course, he comes crawling back to her because he needs a place to stay.
Right.
So, after that, her parents barely saw her. Like she was back home. She was becoming like the Kristen that they remember, and she was getting healthy.
And then all of a sudden,
she was over there all the time. They were, having, it was all great. And then they didn't see her. They were just like, we barely saw her after that. So we're going to end there today. I know. I just I thought I could do this in 4 episodes, but
No, I think it's better to.
the next is going to be the last episode.
Yeah.
So what is coming up? Would you like to know?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Well, Kristen, something very tragic happens to her.
Of course.
He gets a residency at State University of New York, where there are more deaths. And then he goes to Africa when he can't get work in the U.S.
What a great guy.
Yep.
So I'm assuming she dies. That's what I'm going with.
Well, you have to tune in to listen.
Damn
you
it.
have to tune in to listen. Oh, you have to tune in to find out. So, yeah, that's going to make you crazy.
I'm going to guess she dies of poisoning.
Well, a lot of people don't, she doesn't come up in a lot of the stories about him. They gloss over it.
Which is crazy because...
But I think her story needs to be heard.
Absolutely it does.
Right? And it helps talk about domestic violence.
Yeah.
You know, and all that. So it's just, yeah. So that's what's coming up. Now, I would like to thank Meals. I think it's Meals. It's MEALLLS for the fantastic review we got. So on iTunes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if you guys don't mind going over and giving a rate and review, I'm not going to ask for a 5-star, are we?
No.
But you can.
You could.
And you can say something nice too if you want.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that would be cool. It just helps, you know, get us recognized. And
Absolutely. And if you have anything that you want to say to us, you know, privately, you can send us an email as well.
Exactly. And I want to give a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters.
Thank you guys so much.
We've got Shadiro. We got Shadiro. We got Shakira. Ooh, we got Shakira. We got Shakira. Boo-doo-ba-doo-ba.
Shakira.
Shadiro, Shadara. Okay, we got Shadira Monsato. I hope you enjoyed that, Shadira. That was
I really hope you do because she really dropped the ball on that.
Oh yeah. But now you got your own song.
You do, so you're welcome.
If your name ever comes up, it's going to be Shadira. Shadira. Ooh.
Shadira.
And Jenna Watts. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you,
I'm not
Jenna.
going to butcher your name.
Jenna.
Jenna. Ooh. No, it's going to be
Jenna.
Jenna. Okay, now we've got Laura Grandmont.
Laura Grandmont.
Laura Grandmont. Laura L to the A to the U to the R to the A. Grandmont. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
And last but not least,
Give it to me.
Laura. Oh, no, Laura. We already said Laura. Last but not least, Elizabeth Day.
Elizabeth Day.
Elizabeth Day.
Elizabeth Day.
Daylight come with Elizabeth Day. That daylight come with Elizabeth Day.
No.
See what happens when you support us on Patreon?
This is what happens. You get shout outs and we write songs about you. So you're welcome.
And like, you know, you can just like listen to this over and over again. Yeah. And if you ever forget how your song goes.
Exactly. So, I mean, we will be making a record later on this year, but
everybody knows about that. And again, we're going to make it free.
Yeah, of course.
At first.
Because, yeah, we want to see how many we can give out first and before they go up for sale.
Exactly. If we would love if you joined our Facebook group.
Yeah, we would love it.
It's Stat Shocking Traumas and Treatments. And you can find it on Facebook. Type that in. You'll find us. It's a closed group. But as long as you're like a really cool person that aren't jerks to people, you are welcome.
We will accept you.
Yeah. So it's a fun, safe place to go.
And there's a lot of funny stuff on that Facebook page.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we talk about some serious things, but mostly we just have a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, come on, join us there. And if you want to support us on Patreon, we are also Stat Shocking Traumas and Treatments on Patreon. You get a lot of good bonuses on there, extra episodes, and we have a new segment for Patreon only called Coming in Hot.
Coming in hot.
Coming in hot. And you get bonus episodes of Placebo Effect and some other fun things.
Yeah.
We're also putting together a website where you'll get a lot of fun things, but that's going to be down the road.
Yeah, that's down the road.
So, yes, the next episode of Swango will be coming up in a couple weeks. Stay tuned next week for Placebo Effect.
I love her sound effects.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. Oh, wait a minute. Before we go, I want to play a promo for one of my favorite podcasts, History Goes Bump with Diane. And it is so good. It's spooky. It's got some humor. It's got everything you could possibly want. Spooky, humor, history, all of it. Triple H. Go have a listen. I'm sure you're going to love it.
Do you like to mix creepy with your history? Hi, I'm Diane, host of the History Goes Bump podcast, a podcast that is basically a ghost tour for the theater of the mind, featuring the history and hauntings of places that are infamous, and many places you probably have never heard of before. Are these places truly haunted? I leave that up to you to decide. Join me if you dare. Check out historygoesbump.com.